Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Ari Sachs of Congregation Beth Mordechai coming to you with another edition of this week's online Parashah class. I'm here with Walter Rose Simons, who is joining us again. Walter, hi. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. So this week we're focusing on, as always, as always for this cycle, the second third of the triennial reading of the Torah portion. In this particular second third of the Torah portion named Tetzaveh, we read a lot about the particular garments that are worn by Aaron and then also by his sons. And we get a little bit of it, although it kind of continues into the next third, about the particular ritual that's done in which Aaron and the priests and his sons are ordained by Moses to be priests. And interestingly enough, this exact, or not necessarily the precise wording, but this exact ritual is repeated in Leviticus chapter 8 and chapter 9. So it appears two times in the Torah, the idea of becoming ordained as priests. And that Aaron specifically, as a little bit different than his sons, has garments that are a little bit more ornate. He has the breastplate. With inside the breastplate is the Urim and Tumim, which are supposed to basically be placed upon his heart, and then when he has a question or when he has a thought to ask God, that he's supposed to be able to access that breastplate, which will help give him the decision that God has made for him. So it's almost as if it's a unique phone or unique communication tool to be able to talk with God when you're inside of the tent of meeting. In addition, there are many different kinds of sashes and robes of many different colors that he's supposed to wear. And what we're going to be focusing on right now is this one particular element that he has to wear, his headdress or its seats, also known as a diadem that he wears upon his head. And that's where we're going to get started with only one verse that we're really going to focus on today. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Are you able to see it? Walter, can you see it? Okay, Walter has left for a moment. But right now, just want to start with this with this verse. This comes from chapter 28 of Exodus, verse 38. V'haya al metzach Aharon, and it was upon Aaron's forehead. Sorry, just one moment. So it was upon Aaron's forehead. V'nasa Aharon et avon, and Aaron shall bear the iniquity, et avon hakodashim, the iniquity committed in the holy things, asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael, that all of Israel, that the children of Israel shall hallow, lechol motnot kodshehem, even in all their holy gifts. Meaning that when the people of Israel are coming to offer gifts of sacrifice to the temple, that they are giving these sacrifices that are supposed to be offerings of thanksgiving, offerings of penitence, and that embedded within all of the different sacrifices that the Israelites are to offer, there are blemishes. There are these things that are wrong, not just with the sacrifices, but also for all of the particular sins that the Israelites carry with them as they are about to make the particular offering. there's only a couple of offerings in which it's specifically done in order to expiate sin. And we're actually going to get to those a little bit later on. But that the ones that are not necessarily to expiate sin, you could say, how can God accept these if the people who are offering it receive sin or have some kind of iniquity bear that they personally bear? And so what this idea is that Aaron, as the high priest, when he makes the offering, he then kind of soaks up all the sins from the Israelites that exist in their offerings in order for their particular offering to be accepted by God. And this is done by this diadem that is placed upon the forehead. I'll get to the text in just one moment. V'haya al mitzchot tamid leratzon lahem lifnei Adonai. And this tzitz, this diadem, this headdress, is always going to be upon his forehead for the sake of winning acceptance before God. And so I'm looking to see if I can. It seems that we have another guest coming on. So just going to take one moment and then we'll continue. Hi, Richard.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Good, I can hear you. I can't necessarily see you.
Oh, well, I'll try to fix that.
Hi, Richard.
Hi there.
Okay, so we're just right in the middle. It's good to see you. We'll definitely catch up a little towards the end. Sorry again for everyone for the technical difficulties of trying to get people involved in the Hangouts, but I hope that you're able to join us freely now. So where we are, Richard, just to kind of catch you up, is we're in Parashat Tetzaveh, which is towards the end of the book of Exodus, and looking at the particular elements of Aaron and his sons' dress, which are used for their role as priests. And in particular, we're looking at one aspect, which is a headdress, or in Hebrew, it's tzitz, a diadem that is placed upon their head. And that this diadem that actually has a very specific task, that when the Israelites offer sacrifices, and that the Israelites who offered them actually still contain some sin, meaning that they've still done some transgressions which have not yet been forgiven, and the priests want the sacrifices to be accepted by God, that Aaron kind of soaks up that sin from the sacrifices so that the sacrifices can be accepted by God. And it is done through the particular headdress. And the reason for this is because certain sacrifices are not meant to expiate sin. That certain sacrifices are meant just as thanksgiving offerings. And it seems that it's those kinds of sacrifices which Aaron is making sure it's going to be accepted by God. And I think that this idea, which I mentioned in the description, is important because we wear in prayer certain kinds of uniforms. We wear, or in Judaism at least, people wear a tallit, people wear tefillin, people wear different kinds of dress that are used not only for specific religious purposes, the fact that we are told to wear them, but in fact that they're supposed to make a difference to being in that moment in prayer. That is to say that I know of many times in which I've worn a tallit, and when I wrap myself in that tallit, it is as if I am being lifted onto a higher level. And that I know that when I'm wearing a tefillin, I place it upon my head, that I know that it is helping me feel more bound by the traditions and by my sense of Judaism and my understanding of God. As such, in that regard, and as such, in that regard, the dress that the priests are wearing seemingly would have specific powers. You could describe those powers as very similar to like a tallit and tefillin in the sense that it helps raise you to another level. But I think that what the Torah is indicating here is that the dress of the priest, and we could even argue our dress, does even more. It acts as this kind of ritual, not this ritual, but this acts as this kind of mechanism through which the Aaron and the other priests are able to do holier things, more sacred things than they could do without. And one important element of that I forgot to mention earlier is that written upon the headdress is the words Kodesh Ladonai, or Holy is the Lord. And so it's almost as if by having that kind of headdress on, that it functions as this mechanism for being able to make the particular sacrifices holy. So I'm wondering first if you have any questions or points on that particular point.
Well, is there somebody else on the line? I'm not sure if it's just me. I don't want to.
Right now we're missing one other person, but I'm not sure if he's able to join in. So
Okay. It is interesting. I guess I take two kind of experiences. One, generally the sort of specialness of wearing a talis. One, perhaps one that is mine more so than one that's communal from the synagogue. And the other thought that I go back to, I'm not a tefillin wearer, but I
right.
have the last time I did it was the Thursday before my son's bar mitzvah, and it really does give that feeling of physically being bound, which I don't experience at all.
Right.
So.
It creates this kind of sense of connection, or that what you're doing is maybe different than what. And so whether it's a placebo effect, meaning that we just simply need something in order to help us get someplace else, it doesn't necessarily do anything, or that there's a particular power to it. Because within the context of Judaism, other ritual objects, such as a mezuzah, for instance, that contains text from the Torah, are said to actually have spiritual power to protect the home. So for instance, if something bad is going on in your life, one of the Jewish tricks is to be able to go check your mezuzot to make sure that they are kosher, or that there's something, that they're all okay. And there are plenty of stories out there, including one in our own community, in which someone felt that they needed to check their mezuzahs, and because something was going on, and they checked them and realized that they were not kosher. And so to them it felt as if I need to kind of reaffirm that sense of God's protection in my home through fixing these mezuzot. So there's a certain power attached to these particular objects. And one of the questions that's offered by the commentators on this particular verse, chapter 28, verse 38 of Exodus, is, does the power of the amulet, does the power of the diadem, does the power associated with this object, does it exist when the wearer is not wearing it? So that's what we're going to turn to. First, to a commentary from, Rabbi's name is Rav Tuvia ben Rav Eliezer, who wrote a commentary known as the Psikta Zutrata, or the Lekach Tov. And he writes, Sorry, I'm just going to get back to it. He writes, "V'haya'al mitzchot tamid," and it was placed upon his head always. And if you can see that I have a translation here that I'm highlighting right now, I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm going to kind of retranslate as I go in the Hebrew. V'chi lo haya nichnas levet merchat or levet hakiseh. Well, hold on a second. You can't say he wears it all the time. He's got to take a bath. He's got to go to the toilet. Are you actually going to say that he wears this particular headdress when he's in the midst of those particular actions? No, he's not going to be wearing it always. Ella tamid shelo yasiach da'ato mimenu b'sha'a shehu lo sho. Rather, it is to say that the thoughts that his mind shall not be removed from it during the time in which he wears those garments. In other words, that he's saying it's not that when the Torah says that you shall always, that the priest should always wear it, because it's impossible to always wear it. You know, you have to go to the bathroom, you have to go to use a toilet. But I would say we could even take that a step further. You know, when you step out of shul and you don't necessarily wear your tallit or wear your tefillin. Interestingly enough, the idea of wearing tefillin, as we're about to see, is actually that you should wear it all the time, even when you leave the synagogue. The reason why we wear tefillin at the in the early morning, during the early morning service, known as shacharit, on all weekday mornings, is because that's generally when you would put on tefillin for the day. Meaning that the first thing you would do is put on tefillin in the morning, i.e. when you go to first pray, and then you'd wear it the rest of the day. I still remember when I was in Israel and walking through the old city, and I saw a guy talking on his cell phone wearing his head tefillin and his arm tefillin. There still are people who actually do that. But at the same time, for many of us, I think that the idea of wearing garments for a certain period of time is one thing, but we're not going to wear it all the time. You know? Another example could be wearing a kippah. So I personally wear a kippah all the time. That's my own tradition. I know many rabbis who wear it simply when they're doing rabbinic functions. I also know many people who only wear it when they're actually in the synagogue, or even when they're only in midst of prayer or a study. That is to say that we make our own rules around when we should wear it and when we don't have to wear it. And there is an admittance, or I should say, an admission by the Lekach Tov here that there are times in which we're not going to be wearing it, or specifically about the priest, there will be times he's not going to be wearing his headdress. But rather, the point of saying that he shall always wear it is rather to say, when you are wearing your ritual clothes, your sacred clothes, your mind should not be thinking of other things. Your mind should be focused on the particular task at hand. And, you know, one of those things that it just comes to mind with that is when we're sitting in shul and you're wearing your tallit, or even if you're wearing your tefillin, and then you're sitting in the back schmoozing. And the question is, with the tallit and tefillin on, is that what we should be doing? On one hand, you could say it's about creating that sacred space and getting to know each other, and schmoozing is a part of that act. But I think on the other hand that when we wear those particular garments, it's not only supposed to direct our attention to being Jewish, but it's supposed to direct our attention towards God, towards acts of ritual, towards acts of sacrifice, towards acts of purification. And I think that maybe this is compelling us to consider that when wearing these particular clothes, we should be aware of what really should be going through our minds. Feel free to jump on in if you have anything else to share. I'm going to, just to finish up the Lekach Tov here, he says, this is an example for the high priest. Kal v'chomer l'tefillin. But all the more so is this the case with wearing tefillin. Uma imtzit she'ein bo ela kodesh ladonai amrat Torah. Sorry, I have to move the page a little bit. Amrat Torah. Sorry. Uma imtzit she'ein bo ela kodesh ladonai. And just as this headdress, this diadem that is written upon it, holy to the Lord, it says Amrat Torah v'haya al mitzcho shelo yasiach dato, that it says this phrase of Torah and is placed upon the forehead so that one does not so that does not have his thoughts of God removed from his mind, meaning that his thoughts of God should always be on his mind at that moment. Tefillin lo kol sheken. All the more so it should be with tefillin. That it should always be reminding us of our direct connection to God. Now, I want to bring up, and I'm going to stop after this section. We're not going to get to the last part. But Rashi has a very interesting take on not necessarily on the particular headdress, on this diadem, this headpiece, but rather on the way in which the word tamid is actually used in the verse. In other words, that the word tamid, meaning always, is used in the verse. V'haya al mitzcho tamid, and is always placed upon his forehead. Efshar lomar sheyeheh al mitzcho tamid. It's impossible to say that it was always upon his forehead, for the same reasons that the Lekakto was saying it. You got to go to the bathroom. You got to, you're going to be doing other things. It's impossible for this to always be on his forehead. Sheharei eino alav ela b'sha'ata avodah. It is simply there at the time in which the service is made. But rather, what is that word tamid referring to? Ela tamid liratzot lahem. Rather, when the text, the Torah says tamid, meaning always, it is tamid liratzot lahem. That, and I'm going to focus on the translation that I wrote down here, that he should always work to win acceptance for them. Afilu eino al mitzcho, even when the diadem is not on his forehead. Shelo haya kohen gadol oveh be'ota sha'a. In other words, when the high priest is not performing the service. This, I think, is an incredibly important teaching, because I believe what Rashi is saying here is, by moving that word tamid, meaning always, to refer to how the priest should always be trying to accept favor for the Israelites before God, meaning that in all of the priest's actions, he should always be acting in a way in order to try to win favor for his people. That it's saying, even when we are not wearing our outward ritual sacred clothes, even when we're not necessarily busying ourselves with God's work or with connection to our faith, that we should still be involved in not only directing our thoughts to God, but I think here what he's truly trying to say is, don't simply say that the lessons you learn in shul, for instance, should simply remain in shul. That you should be taking them out, and even when you're not necessarily engaged in a Jewish practice, that you should be considering what is it that Judaism is telling you at that particular moment. So it doesn't matter if you're wearing a kippah or you're wearing a tallit or you're wearing a tefillin, you could still act in a holy fashion. You could still act in an ethical way. It's not just at this one place, this one time in the midst of the ritual is when you should be acting in a very nice way. It's like we always make, like differences, whether it's, You treat one person nicely because they treated you well. You treat the other person not nicely because they didn't treat you well. Or you treat one person nicely because you feel that you have to, and you treat the other person not nicely because you really don't feel that you have to. And that Judaism in many ways teaches us that we shouldn't be making those kinds of separations. We shouldn't be simply saying that all of this good Jewish wisdom around being good to people, around living a holy life, around figuring out what it means to be a good person should only be done in the context of a synagogue or of a Jewish community. And then when we go out to the rest of the world, we can just simply act like everyone else. But rather, we need to take those lessons and say, even when my kippah is not on, I still need to act like a Jew. I still need to act like my faith is teaching me. So that, I think, personally is a really important point that we should be taking now. It's not just about the priest in regards to what he's doing to make sure that the sacrifices are accepted by God, but I think it's a larger teaching for us now that whatever we do in our own sort of ritual practice, whatever we do in shul, whatever thoughts that we're thinking about, whatever feelings we're experiencing to bring God into our lives, should not simply remain here. They should be brought out with us no matter what we're wearing. Any thoughts, any questions on that?
Well, it takes me back to the tefillin and the physical imprint that it leaves on you for a period of time after you've taken it off. And
interesting.
It seems like that's a reminder of exactly what you're describing.
Interesting. It doesn't just leave you when you take it off. It's supposed to leave an imprint.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful message. I love it. Well, thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. And thank you for joining us for today. And we'll see you again next week with another edition of this week's online Parashah class. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.